I've got the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Ross Beaton. Ross provides consultancy to government and non-government organisations, providing advice on policy, strategy, research and evaluation. Currently, Ross is a New South Wales Convenor and contributes to Family and Community Services work on better systems, better chances, and is in touch with the FACTS TEI reform. Now, Ross has spent 10 years building innovative youth services in Western Sydney and has worked with the then New South Wales Cleanliness Department, leading the Canterbury Bankstown Place project and New South Wales Hope Partnership with Pacific Island communities. Ross went on to work for the Department of Community Services for almost 10 years. You're just off the half.
You forgive me.
And Ross led teams working closely with community organisations to implement Families New South Wales, Better Futures, Aboriginal Child, Youth and Family, Community Development and Domestic Violence Initiatives. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ross Beaton.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. That sounds really good. So, my job today is to kind of break down for you this kind of healthy-looking tome, which is called Better Systems, Better Chances. And I'm sure that you've all kind of read it really thoroughly. It's on the TEI Reform website as a reference material for you, along with other great documents of interest, including, and I forget what it's properly called, we used to call it the Voluntary Team Review, and Anthony was on that review with me, in fact, and I think briefly kind of contributed to it as well, so it's like a reunion of all contributors. But the value of this research for today is really in terms of, at a number of levels. So, FACTS and DPC commissioned the work through ARACE, which is the Australian Research Alliance of Children and Young People. And what they were interested to understand is what kind of service system should we really aim for? If we could rearrange everything, what should we aim for and what would it look like? And what would the pathways be for children and young people through that? What would the service system competences look like? All kind of really good and interesting questions, and questions which you'll be surprised to know are really remarkably difficult to answer, and hence 300 pages of report. So we're going to do a quick tour through all of that, and I'll start now where I should have started, which is right at the beginning. You've heard about me, so I don't really need to go into that. As I said, what I do now is I'm a consultant most of my time, but I'm also the New South Wales Convenor for ARACE, which means I represent them on some New South Wales advisory bodies with government and also at things like today, and contribute to some of their work on research projects like Better Systems, Better Chances. What we're going to do is skip through some of the content of that report. We're not going to look so much at the things which I think you're already convinced of, which is the evidence and the reason why we should do prevention and early intervention, but we'll touch on it briefly. We're going to really look at why do service systems matter and how can they be better designed and how can we shift towards those. And what do we know about what works and what are we still trying to find out about, because there's some limitations to the research around all of this. So just a little bit about the sponsor, ARACE. So they are a national organisation and they really seek to represent the interests of children and young people, but they do that by working with researchers, with practitioners like yourselves, and with policymakers to really kind of bring together what's the current research, what's the practice, and where are the policy directions and get them in line. So there's about 4,000 members across the country and they contribute to a whole range of different projects. If you go to the ARACE website, there are some interesting things to have a look at. One is the Nest, which a bit kind of reminded me a little bit of what the Advocate for Children and Young People has done in terms of it consulted really broadly with children, young people, families, and with service providers across the country to understand what are the outcomes that really matter, especially to children and young people, and what are the outcomes that will really get a better kind of lifetime result for people. and then articulate those outcomes and track them. So each few years it does a bit of a report card or a scorecard on Australia and says how are we tracking against other OECD countries on education, on health and things like that. So that the nest and the report card are really useful kind of advocacy tools in terms of saying this is where we are. We're a wealthy country and we could be doing a lot better than we are on many of these measures. If you think about the Australian Early Development Census and the information that provides, it's kind of like multiplying that 25 times across a number of domains. Some other work that RACE is doing is on parent engagement in their child's education. You know, what's good practice in that space? How does it work really well? If any of you have a particular interest in that, please talk to me afterwards, because the RACE is looking for people all over the country who are trying to do work on that. And obviously it's less about how much the parents get involved in the canteen or things like that. It's how are parents involved in their kids' homework, how are parents connected to the school, how are schools and parents working together towards the outcomes that they want for children. There's also the common approach, which I'll mention during the talk because it's relevant to some of the research. There's projects of research and evaluation, and of course the report that I've just shown you. On to the review. So as I said, the government provided a brief, about what would a really good service system look like. I think the way to use this research for us, for lots of people, is to think about it at a number of levels. So it may give some insight into how would we like to really organise the local service system, like if we were together responsible for doing that and had the flexibility and the permission to do that amongst us, what would we aim to do and how would we do that? To think about it at a state on a national level around what are the service systems and authorities that would be needed to be in place for local service systems to work really well. It also helps, I think, just understand the existing evidence and gives a snapshot of where we're up to at the moment. And in many ways, that's just reassuring for people in terms of saying, yes, you know what you know. Evidence hasn't moved on. You're not kind of doing the wrong sort of thing, but there is some things to pay attention to. And there are some directions to change that probably we need to pay attention to at this point. So that's what the report's about, and that's what I'm talking about. What I thought would be useful to do at this point is to say, what are we, for you in the service that you work, and as you try and work with others and collaborate with them, what are you hoping to see in your local area? Like, what would you most like to see change in terms of outcomes for children and young people? It's after lunch, I know it's a brave step to ask you a question, but I just thought I'd share it with you. So yes?
Better access to special services like OT, speech, like health, or remote areas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so access to special services can often undermine kind of the good work that people do through their service. So you can have great case management if you can't get to those special services or can't get to a drug and alcohol or mental health service for your client. The momentum that you build can get lost and it's really undermined. So that's a great one.
Closing the gap with early intervention, so as Brighter Futures has moved more into ROSH, it's created that void, and I'm hoping that what the last speaker spoke about will fill that gap, because in communities that's where we know people will engage better with us and more frequently. So.
Yeah, right. So if you didn't hear that, it was saying be able to close the gap between what was kind of the traditional child and family space and the ROSH space, because of Brighter Futures moving up into that ROSH space and potentially leaving some families without a service. So being able to close that, and what you were saying is that families in that space are often more willing to engage because they can feel that things aren't going right.
And we're not waiting until crisis hits.
So you're not waiting until it gets really bad.
And linking with what was said there and what was said there, greater investment in universal services such as
Great.
For sustainable visiting, so that you can identify those vulnerable families that don't fit ROSH guidelines when they
I'm so glad you said that, because I think it's really interesting in my consultancy work, working with FACTS, working with the Department of Premier and Cabinet, and looking at the child and family space. people get pulled into thinking about this is where the answers lie. And I'll talk a little bit about why this is where the answers lie for people who need a service, but it's not really where the answers lie for if you want good population level outcomes. We'll come to that in a minute. One more. Anyone else?
I'd like to see more focus on collaboration between schools and community services. We have a lot of children, particularly out in areas such as Convenor, that are not going to school and are not welcome to go to school because they've had quite challenging behaviours, so therefore they exited and they end up with no education.
Yeah, that's another fantastic point, and it I think reinforces the point down here. Where I am, I live in Western Sydney, and people talk to me about, I think exactly what you're saying, that kids with cognitive impairment or challenging behaviour are kind of encouraged to come to school part-time, meet their attendance requirements, but no one's really educating them. And we're just kind of storing a problem for ourselves for a few years' time because we're not really including those kids in the education system in the way that we should. So if that is happening through schools, there's a limited response, isn't there, that the child and family sector can provide to that. It can try and patch things together, but what we really need is a great health and education system. That was really helpful, thank you for that. I'm really reassured that you're with me and awake, many of you at least. Which is, it's a great thing after lunch. I think it's siesta time, but we'll push on. One of the things that we found as we did the review, and I did 1% at the end, was that the evidence for what happens in the child and family space is really very scarce. So there's some really good, randomised controlled trials that happen. They generally happen overseas, generally in the States, and we haven't invested as much as we should in Australia in that kind of work, improving what works, and in really refining it as we go as well. So, but what was interesting, I suppose, was the evidence that is there is pointing in the same direction and provides a reliable compass for action. So in other words, it doesn't mean we have to be paralysed and go, well, we just don't know. There is enough evidence for us to move in certain directions. The other thing I want to say about this, and perhaps I should have just said it when we were talking about it, is while the evidence does not in my policy role within FACTS, I had responsibility for child protection and early intervention. And one of the things that really kind of hit me as I read through some of the literature, and it was an article in The Lancet that I remember very clearly, it looked at how well Western countries had gone at responding to child protection and what the long-term trends were, and it looked at hard data like hospitalisation rates, child injury rates, that kind of thing, not just substantiations and things which can sometimes vary depending on the culture of delivery. And what I found was that the rates were really quite stubborn. They weren't moving very much. There might have been variations in investment over time, there might have been variations in strategy, but they weren't seeing a lot of change in that. Hope didn't lie in having really good responses to families who were at high levels of vulnerability and risk. They need a response, and those children need protecting. But if you want to get a population level outcome, the hope came from comparing different countries. So looking at the United States and Australia and comparing that to England or Norway or Sweden, and it was the Nordic countries who had really strong investment in their universal health and education and parent support and employment pathway kind of service systems, who had a different level of child protection issues. So their rates, they weren't varying a great deal either, but they were just at a lower level overall because of that investment in universal services. And so for us, one of the really important things to remember as we kind of dive into the detail of the child and family space is that the answer for population level outcomes lies in really driving good investment in universal services. If any of you are familiar with the kind of spirit level book, that's a great compendium of things that brings together all that kind of evidence. It's called the spirit level if you want to look it up. It's a good read. I'm going to jump to the end so that you can tune out then if you don't really want to listen to the rest of the presentation and just kind of take away this slide. And so I figure that's a good strategy after lunch. It's fair and reasonable to ask people for a certain amount of attention. So really in terms of summing up what the research found was that the ideal system I think when DPC and others kind of ask this question, they're hoping that someone will say, so you want a really good childcare centre, then you want some really, before that you want some really good perinatal health services, and then you want some good family support. And they kind of want a service system described in all its elements. That's not what the research shows, I suppose. I mean, you want all of those things. But it was more about having a service system which is not rigid. In other words, it can move. It's not, people aren't tied to job descriptions and organisations and ways of doing things in ways which aren't going to change over time. But it's agile and responsive. And that means the cultures in those organisations, the structures and the processes that respond to people all need to be a bit flexible. And it's a way of us saying through the report that we don't have the silver bullet for what a service system should look like. We just know that what you need to be able to do is organise around the data and around the evidence, and we'll come to that in a moment. The other thing about that was, I suppose, there is growing evidence around what kind of service interventions do work, and we're seeing that build internationally over time. But what we don't have is evidence of how they should all be deployed together. So if you've got X, do you also need Y? What's the step down from Z? Is it to A? What's the sequencing of services, and how does that all work? We just don't have that in an evidence base. We have some experience and practice, but we don't really have it from an evidence base. Just check what my finish time is. Excellent. I'll put a motor on it. One of the things to bear in mind in terms of the changing environment is 15. That sounds better. I was thinking, gee, I've really kind of thrown that out. The investment approach to welfare is one of the emerging thoughts that's happening now in government. So as I work with the Commonwealth and as I work with the state, I hear that a bit. And it's the kind of thinking that is behind the National Disability Insurance Scheme. In other words, but it's being thought of now more broadly. So for instance, in the Commonwealth, they're looking at your payments, welfare payments to people, and thinking, so what's the profile of people who need kind of lifetime support from us through the tax and transfer system? And what sort of interventions would work so that they didn't need so much support and could live a more independent life? But that sort of thinking can go beyond that to then think about, so what are the families where it's more likely that kids are going to enter into JJ or enter into out-of-home care or need kind of really intensive mental health supports? And what kind of interventions would work with those families to mean that, one, they get better results, and two, there's less cost to government and the community in the long run. So that's the kind of thinking that's around, and in New Zealand they're kind of further down this path in terms of trying it, and the Commonwealth, not in this budget but in the budget before, announced a fair investment over 4 years to investigate that for Australia. Look, there's real debate around the value of those approaches, but I think there's a real promise in it too, and what I like around what the Commonwealth has proposed is that they're not looking very narrowly at just what contributes to welfare payments, and I think this will be the really important thing for people like you and me to think about is the narrower you define that, the more danger there is in adopting an insurance-based approach. But if you take a real holistic view of people and all the outcomes, so it's not just about the cost to the Commonwealth and the cost to the state, but it's the cost to everyone. It's not just about the cost to health, but to justice and to facts. And if you're looking at the whole thing, it can be really promising, because what it will do is drive prevention and early intervention, because that is the only way you're going to drive down costs. Whereas if you're holding off on investment until people are at the point in, that's not going to work so well. So it's just one thing to bear in mind, and certainly the rest of this research is kind of consistent with that thinking. Those are the pillars, by the way, for the Commonwealth's approach on this. So, why systems approach matters. I suppose part of why we need to talk about this is the systems that we have at the moment are very much a legacy of the past. We've grown up with government funding services as programs became new or as the opportunities arose, rather than thinking about a place like Parks or a region, and going, what do we need to see in that region or district? So now that we've accrued these kind of piecemeal investments, it's an opportunity to think about, could we be doing it better? I don't think this will be a surprise to you, and it's kind of consistent with what Anthony talked about in terms of what you told the TEI reform process, that that's the kind of nature of legacy systems. There's fragmentation driven by the system, kind of inward focus, cycles of crisis and stabilisation, and responding rather than anticipating. When I did a review which looked at why do some young people in New South Wales get very poor outcomes, they go to jail, be homeless, suicide, we really looked at a lot of service systems that respond to today's crisis and go, we just need to make sure there's a bed over their head tonight. We just need to make sure they're safe at home or somewhere else tonight. We just need to deal with their behaviour in school today. But not a lot of service systems that look here to go, wow, this is an indicator of something, and we need to take a holistic view of this and really try and shift the trajectory that this person is on, rather than just deal with today's crisis so that we can say we dealt with our duty of care and we dealt with today's risk. If we did take that approach, and I think that aligns really well with the investment approach and Sean's investment approach, we'd have a much different approach, wouldn't we? And it would be much more person-centred. It would be much more about who are you, what are your strengths and needs, but also what are your goals and where you want to get to and how can we help you get there. Does that align with what you see? Is there anything else that you just say, gee, there's something else that happens in our area that you really need to be noticing or highlighting apart from those things in terms of what goes wrong in the service system? Still checking that you're with me.
I think a lot of rural remote services are doing a lot of what we're talking about already, because we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
In the fact that being isolated, we don't have access to intensive care support, so we're already stepping outside of what we should be doing, stretching our boundaries. It's about acknowledging this is great, and I really think all this information is awesome. But what I'd like to know is what is the outcome going to give us to help fill the gaps that are being shown from early intervention to the ROSH factor, and how are we going to? Because our clientele are increasing in how high risk they are getting, but they're not tipping over yet to that ROSH factor. And yet we're working with them, and we do the holistic because we don't have a choice, and that's what we want to do, and that's how we service our clients. But we already know that there's needs there, and yet I'd like to know how, with all this evidence, how we're going to see the change that will help us better service our clients and give us more support to stop responding rather and then get to that anticipating stage.
Yeah, great question, isn't it? And I did notice on that list, it doesn't say anything about resourcing, and probably that's because it's kind of beyond the scope of what anyone's able to change easily. But I suppose it's important for us to understand the political debate around this, isn't it? And I think the race is very clear around this. We can be told and we can believe that we can't afford certain services, that we can't afford to have good universal services, and we can't afford to invest in a great response to people who need it. Or we can look at the evidence and believe that actually if we invest in those things, we're more able to afford that kind of response because everyone's included and participating and contributing, and we are allowing people to play their part in society. We're an advocacy body, research and advocacy. We're not going to change the policy parameters, but I think that's exactly the question to ask every time you're invited to contribute, because ultimately, it's that shift in investment. And Australia is not at the worst end in terms of looking at the United States. It's not at the best end in terms of some of those Nordic countries. But we are in the middle of making choices about all of that for the future. And I'm not just talking about this election, I'm talking about the last 10 years and the next 10. So people just need to think about that in terms of what we want to be saying to the community about that kind of investment. Does that make sense? It's an inadequate answer for the issue of today, but I liked hearing the restlessness in that because it's the right thing. I don't think we should be happy with where we're at. Thank you very much. So I'm going to skip through this one. This is a really old slide, but it was resurrected by a review in England a couple of years ago. What it showed was, if you see the light green line, that's low socioeconomic status kids from 22 months to 118 months. And the dark green is high socioeconomic status kids. And the top one is kids with a high intelligence and kids with a lower cognitive score down the bottom. And what you see is the kids with high socioeconomic status, if you take the bottom one, their scores rise over time. And if you look at the low socioeconomic status down the bottom, it doesn't rise over time, it kind of flat lines. What's really alarming is that for low socioeconomic kids, the light green line at the top, who've had high cognitive ability, over time their performance comes down to meet their peers from low socioeconomic areas. And the point of this slide is really just to say, and this is a, it's a different country, different class system, it's not exactly comparable, but the point of it is to say what we do as a community in terms of our service system and investment makes absolutely a difference to outcomes for kids. And it certainly makes a difference for kids who are living with disadvantage. So it's not an academic thing, it's not a principle thing, it's a real life thing that those differences can. It's an iceberg, but it's more than an iceberg. So this is really just to say, when we think about service systems, there's the things we can see, services that are delivered on the ground, but there's a whole lot beneath that we also need to address. One of the things, sorry, I'm trying to get there, that in consulting with service providers recently was they were seeing the need to kind of merge services to reshape what they were doing, but they were also noticing enormous resistance from the boards, from the staff, and so that resistance to change is one of the challenging things. I mean, primarily this slide is here to say it's really important to invest in the capacity of people such as yourselves and staff in the sector, but it's also a little challenge in terms of it's people's willingness to make change, which will also see us achieve better systems. Right, now I'm just going to be really boring and just skip through the last few slides. So strap in. We understand what we know. We need a service system to look like, and I don't think anything up there would be a surprise to you. The question is really how we get there. Why we want to get there, though, just needs to always be reminded to us. One, it's about, yes, it's cheaper, and it's often a difficult case to make, but it's actually quite evidence-based. It's cheaper to have a well-informed prevention early intervention system. The other reason is that issues can be more manageable. Now, there can be an issue where people don't want to engage with services while the problem's not so bad, and that's a different thing. But certainly, if we can engage them, the issues are more manageable. But there's two others, which is, one, it's more respectful of citizens. Why do we wait until they need a coercive service, child protection service or juvenile justice service or mental health service, when we could be delivering something that's actually what they want when they want it, rather than saying, no, you can't have this service now because you don't meet the level of need, and then going, well, actually, you have to have this service now. So there's something there about respecting people as citizens. And then the other reason is obviously about it gives better outcomes for people. So, in terms of what the answer is or what we're aiming for, we're talking about a shared approach to how we work, holistic and shared understanding of the development and wellbeing of people, common language, linked intake, case planning, outcomes measurement, coherent processes, and better matching of service responses to need. That's what we're saying we want, and if I had time, I'd ask you what your best experiences of that were, but we don't have time, I'm sorry. I can think of things sat perhaps in the Families New South Wales space which came closest to that, but there's perhaps other experiences as well. Shared practice frameworks are a really important part of that, and for that I'll just refer you probably to the common approach as the start of that. So if you look at the ERACI website or find one of the brochures over here next to the ERACI banner, you'll see something called the common approach, which is one step in that direction. In Scotland, they've kind of, and one of the great things about smaller jurisdictions is you can kind of see the whole service system and arrange it in a better way. They've developed something called Getting It Right for Every Child. You can't see the whole slide there, I'm sorry about that, but it's an interesting example of how you might arrange a service system. The thing I want to say about this is what I said before, that second point. We're not very good yet at understanding how it all fits together. We understand how some interventions work really well, but putting it all together is difficult. And while we do understand that some models of service delivery are great, what we also understand is that the how of what gets delivered is also important. And so sometimes I talk with people around, in psychology, I think they develop a thing called common elements. So you can buy a package, in this space it might be something like home builders, which is a proven evidence-based approach to dealing with people. Or you can think about what are the common elements from all the programs that work really well with children and families with needs, and can we bring them together intelligently in the way that we deliver casework, etc. One of the really important things that we found here, I know I'm over time, I'll finish now, is in this, where you don't have a clean-cut single answer for what you need to deliver, what you do need is really good key workers. Someone who holds the whole picture of the clients, sees the whole picture of what the service system is, and brings those two together really well. So part of the answer is having an intelligent service system, but also part of it is having a key worker who's not just delivering a slice of what this person needs, but is trying to understand everything and coordinate that. These are my last two slides and then I'm stopping. I think what this slide is really saying is what we want to bring together is evidence around what works, bring together good measurement of what we're actually delivering and the outcomes achieved, and then have a flexibility in the service system to respond to that. So in other words, we find out that a different way of doing things works well, we're ready to respond to that. We look at the data and we go, gee, there's some service blockages there in terms of kids not going to school who should be going to school, we're not able to access the mental health, drug and alcohol or specialist services that we need, and being able to respond to that. I was going to invite you, and maybe in the question time you can think about it, but what would it look like to be able to sit down at a table for your local area and be managing the service system on the basis of data, looking at the ROSH reports, looking at the non-ROSH numbers in terms of demand, thinking about what are we actually delivering through what programs, thinking about what are the outcomes we're seeing, thinking about together what's our resources, we're getting a better set of outcomes for the whole cohort of children and young people in our area. What would that look like and could we do it? And the last thing is really around implementation. So some of you will be familiar, probably all of you, with implementation science. And I think the very first speaker, or maybe someone said it earlier, maybe not you, was really just saying, look, we're often seeing, it was Joe, we're often seeing that people have seen an evidence-based approach, but it hasn't been implemented well or hasn't been managed well. So that's one of the lessons certainly from the research. That's me. Thank you very much.
What an inspiring talk, and I was listening to the comment you made around the attitudes that we bring and how we might repeat the work that we do. I think John Collins just released, his expert audition of his book. That's not how we do it around here.
Yes. And
maybe need to have a look at what we are doing. So I'm just going to try and open to the floor. Are there any questions that we'd like to ask? Can someone run a microphone?
I was just going to comment, it might be loud enough anyway. I was just going to comment, thanks Ross for a very inspiring talk. I really liked your comment when you were referring to the cost of this. We can't afford these things, but maybe we can't afford not to invest.
yeah, that's right. I think that's the truth.
Do you think it's inconsistent how the previous
families and each can sail up and sail down and what, how they sit together?
I don't think so. I'm trying to remember exactly what that comment was, but so within an overall envelope of funding, I guess it's about having flexibility within that. And I think what was put up in terms of what the TI reform has heard so far from people, what was reported back there, absolutely consistent with the evidence. But I guess it does mean that you wouldn't want to be complacent about the way we do things around here just because the funding is the same. That there needs to still be a restlessness around how do we drive improvement over time and what data do we need to do that. At times, when I'm exposed to some of the data for statewide service systems, etc., I just think, wouldn't it be great if people in the local area could see this data in real time or in a timely way and be planning and responding to that in terms of their local service system. I'm hoping that's where we're moving to.
I just wanted to go back to the advocacy for children, and whenever I listened to one of those kids, they were actually saying, I wish I knew what it was like in the real world. Yeah. And we've got a perfect opportunity in the education system, instead of making them learn about American history, how to budget, what their rights are, home issues was one thing that came out of that. So maybe that was just a comment.
No, I'll take that as a comment. Certainly, I think, as I was listening to Grigor earlier, it was exactly along those lines, I suppose, of we kind of have always known that children and young people are really restless and want to be involved in things, and then how do we provide the structures that enable that and not get in the way? So it's great in terms of what schools do.
A question up there?
I may have missed it, but I just wondering when you're talking about fragmentation of services and expectations of people, the sorts of things that people can use to, with the laws, do you see it, part of that fragmentation may come, for example, from lack of federal laws to actually draw this together instead of going from New South Wales to totally different services, but going from parks to someplace else to a totally different service. Making the best of all protection.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the research really says, it's because people are crazy and do bad things in their services. And having been a policy writer, and I shudder at some of the things that we used to do in terms of writing guidelines for programs, the government often kind of sets things up in a certain way, and that makes it more difficult. And so really this process, and it's the opportunity through TDI reform, is to think about how can we be more flexible and come up with solutions that make sense. There's a tension though, isn't there, between solutions that make sense in your local area and having kind of statewide or national consistency as well. And one of the things that people say is they find it difficult when moving areas and different services. I don't know that that's really a bad thing. It is confusing for people, but I think the ability to really design your service system to what people need where they are is important.
More of a comment. In rural and regional areas, we're really adaptive. We make the most of the resources we've got. We do whatever we can to go outside of the boundaries sometimes to make things happen for families. One of the things over time, what I've learned of coming out of early childhood services and into the child protection realm and going through all those early intervention spaces is there seems to be a lot of things that work in small pockets, often throughout these regions, and yet we don't capitalise on those. We don't have a forum that on a regular enough basis that we can come together and have those conversations around what's working well and what's not working well. And I think that if we could come together more often, as a wider region in rural and regional areas, and say, what is working in your area? Because I know there's some fantastic stuff that happens, but I've also seen where the gaps are and how people are a bit fearful around the child protection space and how to make those referrals and what to refer on. And we get isolated, I think, in our little pockets. So developing something that we can talk together, listen to the children, but also listen to us out here as well, it would be really helpful.
I think that's a good point, isn't it? So we've talked a little bit about people dealing in areas of higher risk now, and one of the ways of kind of managing that is to be sharing practice and understanding how other people are doing it and learning from each other. I think the more isolated you are, the more likely you are to operate in a risk-averse way, and that's never going to be great for clients, and it's not going to be good for you. But if you're connected to others and you've got the opportunity to reflect on practice and you've got some opportunity to kind of share risk in some ways, then that's going to be a better environment for dealing with that.
And frequency, we don't need it every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. There you go. There's a message for someone here.
Any other questions? I will still have the benefit of Ross being. Gone. Mr. Ross, we want to say thank you very much for your contribution.